Um, so as we've covered, I am Head of SEO Strategy. That means I put together kind of integrated technical SEO content strategies with a bit of digital PR/link building on the side too. For context, I've just got a new job. So I used to be MD of an agency called White.net, and we have just been acquired by Found, which is how I came to join them. And when I joined on my first day, I turned to my new boss and I went, "My God, I think brand is a ranking factor. So I'm 100% sure we should do some branding." And my theory was, because he was like, "Explain it, because you're obviously wrong." And I was like, right, well, Google algorithm uses machine learning. We know that. And then I was like, and machine learning has helped Google understand synonyms. That's in their patent. Cool. Simple. So what if brand is just a different type of keyword? And then I use these as examples because these are all brands that have become interchangeable for any of their product names. So quite often you'll say you're going in the jacuzzi just as easily as you'd say you were going in the hot tub. But jacuzzi is the brand name. So if Google's understanding synonyms, then could it be possible that Google is seeing those keywords as being synonym brands? And actually, brand has just fallen into the keyword category. So that made me think that the way your brand is searched for, spoken about, linked to is a ranking factor. And I gave this talk at Brighton SEO, so like a week and a half ago. And I was like, come on guys, brand, synonyms, this is all a thing. And then Google had its birthday. And for their 20th birthday, Google made a series of announcements about things they've worked on, that they've launched, that maybe they've not spoken about, but also about things that they were working on and stuff that's coming out. The coolest one I think they talked about was neural matching. So for those of you that don't know what neural matching is, it's basically this, and I stole this example directly from Google. But if you don't know the word for what you're searching for, it will fill that word in, and it will still put that word quite often in bold in the search results. So here, if your TV picture looks funny, and you search something like, "Why does my TV look like this?" it knows that you mean the soap opera effect. And the reason it knows that is because it's a common problem with some type of HDTV, so loads of people keep searching that. And it's like when you say, "Why is my picture fuzzy?" you actually mean, what is the soap opera effect and how do I fix it? So it displays the results for what is the soap opera effect, the exact same SERP. Now, what Google actually said as well is that 30% of all queries now are using that neural matching already, and that it's learning through an artificial intelligence structure. So that means they said 30% a couple of weeks ago. We now know that's bigger now. So if we take a step back, when we initially go to Google something, it's because we don't know the answer. But if we don't know the word to Google, now Google will help us find that. So Google is giving us what we want before we know it ourselves. In effect, Google is becoming a discovery engine. Now, if you were listening closely to Dom, he just was like, organic search doesn't work in discovery. And it would sound like we disagree. But you would be wrong. You would be wrong. So, what I'm trying to say here is that discovery and search need to be seen as separate things and very different entities. So when we look at how Google is changing to back up my discovery engine theory, quite literally, this is the Google feed, which was covered in the talk this morning, which they now have called Google Discover for a start, so pretty big clue on the discovery thing. But it suggests related topics. You can click into a topic to browse. So you're getting an answer and you're getting information without actually initially doing the search. Then the most interesting thing to me is the topic layer. So the topic layer is basically sitting above the knowledge graph, and it means on a single search you can browse through rather than type in the related queries. So if you look at one of these, well, both examples are about dogs, obviously, but you can click through to see related types of breeds. You can click through and you can see all the different information about that one breed that you've searched for without having to do another query because it knows those are related. The interesting thing about the topic layer is that even if you're looking at the same topic, so you're looking at two different types of dog, it will show you a different topic layer and a different choice of navigation through it based on the searches to that query that are related. So it's not as broad, it's not as generic as just she searched for dogs, she wants to know size, colour, other dog attributes. Instead, sorry. Instead, It specifically picks it out related to that attribute, that dog. Sorry, I'm like dying today. Right, activity cards, next thing that's changed. This is really personalization. So you can pick up your search where you left it. And if you're mid-search, you go off, you do something else, and then you come back because, say, you're planning a trip and you've planned half of it. It will ask you if you want to go back to what you were looking at, and it will link back in, and then it will also put them into categories, and you can save into those categories. So if you were planning, like, I don't know, a trip to Copenhagen, you might decide you were going to pin everything into it. And then you might be like, and I'm going to go to Sweden whilst I'm there, so I'm going to pin everything into this bucket for Sweden, and I'm going to have my 2 buckets saved in my search. It's kind of pinning from Pinterest, isn't it? Like, it's not rocket science what they've done here. It's just another way to help discovery. And then I just wanted to bring this quote up because I think it's another really big way that Google has changed, which is the idea that we can push our rankings forward through an entity association rather than just relying on links, kind of makes it incredibly powerful. And by entity association, I mean having that having that link with the topic layer and knowing that things can interact together and knowing how those channels match up. Sorry. Thank you. I considered drinking Dom's water for a second, and then I was like, no, it's a really, really poor choice. Right. So what we know here, based on all of that, with all of these changes going on in how the search displays and actually getting results before the query itself, is that our standard methods simply don't work. Some data to back that up, standard SEO tools, such as MozRank and all of the other ones, that you shouldn't be looking at, because they struggle to predict more than 15% of ranking positions. They're great at telling you what's going to be position 1 to 3, but then anything that's kind of 4 to 10 or 10 over, they're just like, yeah, you rank low. They're never right. And they won't be able to forecast who's going to rank where. And 34% of searches at the moment also result in there being no click, which means that high rankings, even if your ranking predictor has helped you get to that point, high rankings also don't result in high traffic because most queries don't have a click. So sometimes it does, and you can see from this Ahrefs study that there is a really clear correlation looking between traffic and your ranking and the search volume. But when we look at ones where there's a clear answer, what we find is that actually your total traffic is quite low compared to that total search volume. So the top result for saying December in Spanish only gets 135 visits a month out of 3,500 searches. Like, that feels low, doesn't it? That's not a high click-through rate they're getting. And that's because there's an exact answer. So why would people click? They're spending the time in the SERP. Or perhaps they're now going to be clicking on something through that topic layer and going through to a related search without having to actively search themselves. And I think where we're all going wrong is that we're optimizing for search and not discovery. We're thinking of ourselves as SEOs instead of discovery engine optimizers, hence the title change. Yes. So what I want to do is cover the difference between search and discovery and actually give you some practical stuff you can go away with to start optimizing for discovery. So in my eyes, search, when we look at search, the domain holds all the value. And if the domain holds all the value, things like links, your page rank, everything like that is crucial. And that's really good for low down the funnel. It means it's query-based, and it also means there's a single answer. So someone searches a question and they want the immediate answer, which is why Google gives you quite a black and white result. So it will just give you an answer box because it thinks you're looking for an answer. I got told about something really cool that Bing's doing where you get multiple answer boxes and you get like pros and cons in answer boxes because they understand there's a grey area. It'll be interesting to see if Google turns search into that. On the other side of things, discovery is about being queryless, and it's about having a journey and helping someone through that journey. And in that instance, it's the entity that holds the value. And the entity doesn't have to be the domain. It can be related to the topic, the brand, much bigger than just a single couple of URLs. So in my eyes, an entity can be a domain or a non-domain. And if you think of a non-domain entity, you can think about TV, music, actors, but also brands. Basically, like proper nouns would be a non-domain entity. And within an entity, you can have a sub-entity. So something that contributes towards the power of your initial entity. So if your main non-domain entity is something broader than your domain can become that sub-entity. That might sound difficult to get your head around. I was going to pick a good singer, but the only person in my head is Katy Perry, so we're going to go with her as the example. Right, so Katy Perry would be your non-domain entity because she is bigger than her personal site. But then her personal site and her personal domain is the sub-entity because it contributes towards her authority online, but so does Ticketmaster and the places she's having gigs and their sites talking about it. So it all contributes towards this larger entity. Ideally, if we can make our brand the larger entity and we can make the domain part of the sub-entity, then it's actually easier to do our jobs. Because you know what? If the domain doesn't have as much power as your massive competitor with their enormous budget, let's optimize for other parts of our entity rather than fixating on this one singular sub-entity, which is what we're doing. Cool? Great. This was put together quite quickly, hence the fact this isn't pretty. So I was like, oh God, what if they don't follow this bit? Awesome. So we can also look to Rand, where Rand sort of talked about the change in the goal. And he was saying that in SEO, we should be focusing more on brand. We should make my brand more searched for. And I think we can tie this up. Like a lot of us SEOs that are talking about brand being a ranking factor and driving brand search are also talking about understanding that there is an entity beyond your domain. And this is a nicer way to think about it and explain it to your boss and get buy-in than saying we should do some branding. Because when we talk about doing branding and doing discovery engine optimization, what we're talking about is being front of mind, being useful, being that brand and being better than other people. So how do you do that? It's dead simple. All you really have to do is do a massive marketing campaign, some offline advertising, get some TV in prime time, make sure you're advertising on the tube, metro, maybe put something at the airport so just everyone sees it. Awesome. You're going to spend all of your money, and pretty much every brand has a budget that doesn't let you do all of this. So it's not really great advice, is it? So instead we're going to talk through my 6 points. Well, there's actually 5, but I don't know how to get rid of that yellow box. So we keep 6 because everything has to be an even number. So don't be alarmed when at the end I'm just like, and do it again. As I said, new companies, so new PowerPoint templates. They're very tricky to use. So what we're going to do is think about high up the funnel, simplifying content, using structured markup, actually deserving to rank, and understanding what user centricity means for real. And we're going to do all of that in 12 minutes. So for thinking higher up the funnel, the thing here to note is there's no such thing as a truly accurate search volume. So all of the tools, AdWords, and everything else pretty much aggregate your search volumes. So there is no way that the same amount of people misspell the word laptop so ridiculously as the number of people that spell cheap Windows laptop correctly. We know here that they've made a group. Google makes keyword clusters in the data they give us. If you're not even doing anything on paid advertising, then you also just get a nice little range that isn't that helpful. So instead, we need to focus on understanding the consumer's journey and the moment they're in instead. And that ties amazingly up to discovery, because in discovery, there isn't a query, so who cares what the search volume is? So when we're looking at the moment, we need to think about what our customers are doing and what type of information they need. This is a terrible London example, but when you're on the underground, you get Wi-Fi when you're at a tube stop. You don't get it between stations. And you're underground, so you have no signal. So in my eyes, AMP is the best thing ever, not from an SEO perspective, but from a user perspective, because I know that I can load the news via an AMP page when I'm at one of those stops, which is for like a minute, and that I can then read that article on the way to the next stop and then load something else. Like, that's understanding my moment. And if you want to target B2B and you want to target consumers on their way to work for it, because you're like, actually, this is something they'll think about before their day starts, let's give them some quick information, then that works really nicely. So it's understanding what your customer are doing and what type of information they need and how they want to consume it. Cool. So then we're going to talk about simplifying your content. And simplifying your content is basically how to get answer boxes alongside the structured data bit afterwards. So the first thing I want to talk about is format. When you're at school in the UK, you are taught to write every paragraph in the same structure, and you're taught to write your point, an expanded example or some evidence of your point, and then your commentary. And it gives you like good practice for writing essays and passing exams. But we seem to have forgotten that as adults, especially in how we write web pages. So this is the website that owns the answer box for what is agile software development and for what is agile. And you can see they answer the question in the top 5 lines, right? That is the answer box size, what they've done here. And what they've also done to put this up there is analyse the typical length of answer boxes. And then they've written their answer within that character count in order to try and win the place. They've then put their expanded examples that are going to help people who do click through to understand why they've said what they've said. And then this comment bit is the really nice bit about their brand where they're like, and this is why Agile is great and you should work with us. Like, it doesn't really have the SEO value, but it does have a brand and conversion value. So it can be quite tempting to put your brand and your conversion piece at the top of the page because you want people to understand you and kind of like want to work with you. But by putting your point first, you're helping Google to understand what it is people would discover when they land on this page. What additional information they could be looking for to learn is there. The other thing is just to keep it simple in terms of your formatting. For things like tables, if you can put it in a table, do. I've never seen an answer box that has more than 5 columns, but every time I use this, I expect someone to tell me they've seen one because they're changing all the time. And define what's in your table. Just be dead clear with your titles and your axes on them. And when you're doing lists, make sure you actually use proper bullet points and proper formatting. Don't use double spacing. So we call it answer box capture because we think that's a nice way of selling it, basically. But if you double space between your bullet points in your list and you're putting multiple line breaks in, what you're actually doing is you're separating the relationship between your points and it stops Google considering it as a list fully. So don't do anything silly in your basic HTML to make it look nice. Like change your actual style so that it's styled correctly in a style sheet rather than directly doing the HTML yourself. Sometimes it can mean you need to ask your developer to put the content in for you or to change the rules on your content. But it's a really quick way of winning. And all of these types of things are the things that are going to help you for the topic layer to understand and integrate in, because a lot of those cards in the topic layer are based around lists and bullet points. And another dog example. I didn't realize how dog-filled this was. So the next thing to think about is structured data. You should know what this is by now, but it's basically a way of signposting. Now, the other thing we learned at school when we were taught to write was to signpost our paragraphs. And you're taught when you write presentations, you should signpost them. You should tell people what you're going to say it, and then be like, look, I said the thing. It's very similar in what you're doing with structured data. You're signposting what your content's going to be on the page. By putting structured data in around things like prices, imagery, titles, you can get nice little answer boxes like this, where your products are actually appearing in lists. So when you search for best truck, multiple examples come up from different sites. Structured data is something these sites all have in common. We actually monitor ours of all competitors, what structured data they have on the site, and we keep an enormous Google sheet. And then if an answer box changes, which we have an alert on, we see if their structured markup has changed and if it's something like that that's triggered it. So tracking that is really useful. And look for clarity in articles. Like, there is no fixed price for advertising, but there is an answer box. Because Google believes things are black and white, quite often they'll willingly put an answer box up, even if it's ridiculous. So anyone searching for advertising prices that is an intelligent person who is looking to either buy some advertising or works in advertising will click on this for more information. They'll know that just this tiny setup cost, which is between like 63,000 and 8 million, which is quite a large range, isn't the answer they were looking for. They're going to come through to your site, but you might as well own that box by having a simplified table that's going to help you get it. So what about when there's no search results? Ultimately, we need to help Google understand, or we just need to accept we're not going to get those sorts of results and those sorts of answer boxes. When I first started working in SEO, I was told not to use structured data because Google was going to steal and scrape my content. This is very similar to the argument about not using AMP. There's this fear that by giving something to Google, you're giving up your own authority and all of this. That's true if all you care is about your sub-entity of your domain. If you care about your major entity and your actual brand, give everything away. Have all of the rankings and all of the visibility possible, and it will all tie up together. I mean, obviously, be nice if Google didn't steal your content. Odds are it's not going to happen, though. Would be my theory, but feel free not to tweet that. And don't tag Barry, basically. And then the final thing, maybe fifth, fourth, we'll see, is about deserving to rank. So if you're doing the same product and the same price, and you've got the same delivery and the same reviews, why would a consumer choose you? Google needs some evidence you're the preferred brand, and that evidence isn't going to come through just having an authoritative domain. So that's going to come from people thinking about you. Google can read minds. Talking about you, searching for, and clicking on your brand. So this is where it really ties into what Rand said about driving brand search and being the most searched for brand. But I believe what you want to be searched for is a compound. So you want your product type plus your brand name together. And that's going to be the thing that signals to Google, these are synonym brands, and ties back up to the original point. But again, this is very much optimizing for that kind of just domain sub-entity level. And then the final one now is focusing on users. So Google's mission statement, which they have used for literally like 15 years, is about the perfect search engine understanding what your need is. And they keep talking about this you thing. And every time they talk about you, they don't mean the SEO and they don't mean the website. They actually mean the consumer. So that's why they can do things like say, we don't want URLs anymore. Because they're making something better for consumers rather than for the websites. And the problem is we've invested so much time into search for our URL and search for our website and not into our bigger entity. And that's why when Google's changed for consumers, we all think Google's trying to destroy our lives. Instead, it's because we've misplaced our focus and we need to kind of readjust that because that tactic just doesn't work anymore as well as it could do. So I'm going to give you 3 very quick tips for measuring it. All of these basically don't involve any tools. So the first one is your brand and product search. So we know that search volume isn't really a thing, so why not just use Google's data from Search Console? Because you're just trying to get a comparative metric rather than an absolute number. On that basis, we look and we monitor our brand plus product search and then our click-through rates accordingly. And we try and drive our brand plus product into search. We also track our average position against our CTR through Search Console. The reason we do this is because it shows an increased trust in your brand and that your other activities have worked. Because if your average position remains static and you've not done any search optimization, but you've done discovery optimization, your position should remain static, but you should start to see your click-through rate increases anyway, because even though you still rank position 4, people know who you are, they've interacted with your brand before, so they keep clicking on your result anyway. So it shows a better brand awareness. And then tracking structured data. So we do this for the person that owns the answer box as well as the second and third place, which you can get through just doing a site domain search into Google. Sorry, you do your query search into Google and then you put minus the site that you are, that currently owns the answer box, and it will remove that site from the listings, which means the second place answer box will appear. So if there is a second place, you'll see who it is. You then pull that domain out and put it back into your original query with a minus for that domain, and you can see the third place. And then we take a scrape of what their structured data is on the site. And then from that, we put it into a spreadsheet and we track for errors and see if they fixed or changed things. There is a tool at the moment called Little Warden that is integrating this in, he said, in the next couple of weeks, so that it will kind of automate that if you just put the domains you want to track the structured data on, because it is a monitoring tool. And they saw this manual process and realized it can be done in like 2 minutes if you know what you're doing with development. So my final thoughts, we need to see our optimization as for discovery, not just for search. And that's because the way people interact with Google is changing, but also the way Google is interacting back is changing. Google is taking a much more active role in that interaction. It's not relying on a query, and sometimes it takes the lead and gives you what you want before you know it. In that case, we need to be there and optimizing for that, and that is not a search. And that means we need to think higher up the funnel, simplify our content, use proper structured markup, deserve to rank, be properly user-centric, and then repeat it all again. And that's it. Thank you for listening. And there's a huge list of all the data there. Cool.